Back in the previous tutorial we completed this CMS integration, so now we have a ready-made composite service which is getting in invoices, it's validating them to check if they are correct. If they are incorrect, human task is launched to manually correct them, and finally the invoices are sent out to procure to pay process for goods received. Last missing bit is adding real-time visibility into what is happening in this composite service, and that's done with a tool called Business Activity Monitoring. Let's jump into the BAM's main screen. So the URL for BAM is this. It's the server name. Default port is 9001/Oracle BAM. And there, when you go, you just log in with the common username and password as everywhere else. And in this BAM we define what data to read in and what reports to generate. And the data is defined in this architect part. Here I can define the kind of data objects. I can also create or define enterprise message sources like JMS messages, external databases. I can also create alerts, so BAM can also act as a kind of an action engine. So you get in events, you look at the data fields there, and if they match certain criteria, then you can launch an action like send a notification or even launch another process. But in this tutorial we are only looking at these data objects. And first we can create a subfolder here. Let's call this, for example, tool, like tutorial 2. Let's go to that folder and let's create a data object here. Let's call this, for example, invoice. And then just add some fields. Let's add, for example, timestamp. This is a field that's automatically populated by BAM, so you don't have to send any data in. Then let's add, for example, invoice number. This is the incoming invoice number from the invoice. This should be unique for every invoice that we receive. Actually, in more rare cases, we might receive the same invoice multiple times, or invoice number. If, for example, the original invoice has been sent to the wrong person, we return it to the billing company, and they may resend it back with the same invoice number. Later in this BAM tutorial, I show how you can overwrite existing events with the new event with the same primary key. So if you want to report, for example, one invoice only once in some report, there is a special operation type called upsert, which is like an update plus insert, which we then use later in the upcoming tutorials. Let's add, for example, validation type. This would be a string tracking. If it was manually or automatically validated, we want to track how much there is still manual work, so how well this whole kind of character recognition process is working. Let's add, for example, this vendor name. We would perhaps like to track that who are the biggest vendors still sending us manual bills. Charge the amount. These names don't have to actually be the same as in the invoice, so you actually do a mapping later in JDeveloper between the invoice and then whatever this is defined in the BAM. Let's add, for example, validation text. This would be some type of a text. For example, it could record the business rule that this invoice failed, so we can later we have a more detailed information about why the invoice was incorrect. Let's add, for example, this validated. And that's a boolean. I could also indicate here if some fields are mandatory, but I'll just allow everything to be nullable here. Just create data object. And that's all we need for this data definition. Then in this Active Studio we define reports. I will create a new report here. So let's call this for. First I define what is the look and feel of this report. So let's take, for example, this type of report. I can give the report a title. And then I need to define for every pane that what type of data I want to show. So let's take this, for example, as a bar chart. Then we need to define what data to process in that report. Let's say that, for example, we want to show the validation type here. We want to group by the validation type. Also the validation type in this report. So we want to kind of have two bar charts, one for manual and another one for automated, and to see how much there is a kind of still manual work needed. And then we want to show the count. And that's it for this report. Let's make the other one also bar chart. Will be based on the same data, invoice data. Let's say that we want to track the vendor, who are the biggest vendors still sending us manual bills. And that's all there is for this part. And let's make a last one like a list, just a list of all the events coming in. It's based on the same data. Next. Here I can define, let's take, for example, timestamp as first field. Perhaps the vendor is the next one. Invoice number perhaps as the next one. Maybe the validation type. Maybe the charged amount before it. And that's all. And then we need to save this report. I think that's a good name. So, and that's all there is to this. So now we have defined the incoming data and one dashboard with 3 different reports. So that's all there is to creating reports in the BAM. In the next tutorial we will integrate the BAM into the JDeveloper, and then in the subsequent tutorial we will do the testing and show how the values kind of get populated here. But this is all for this tutorial, so thanks for watching and see you in the next tutorial.